Il violino per me significa poter esprimere nel modo migliore tutti quelli che sono i colori della musica, nel senso che penso che il violino sia lo strumento che si avvicina maggiormente alla voce umana e per questo noi con questo strumento possiamo veramente realizzare infiniti colori della musica, infinite tonalità di colore, come per un pittore avere a disposizione per dipingere tantissime possibilità di colori.
It all started about 5 years ago when two musicians from Cremona, Leo Tedeschi and Matteo Bersani, approached us and told us that the Museo del Violino would be open to a sampling session probably and record their instruments. Then over the course of 4 years I went there several times and we had a number of meetings, not only with the museum but also with the city of Cremona, with the Friends of Stradivari, to make this happen. Here at the Instruments we are kind of specialized in acoustic instruments, and there are not so many musical instruments names known to the broader public, but of course Stradivari is quite a name, and for us that was kind of a heartfelt project, yes.
Per me Stradivari significa molto perché appunto sono tanti anni che suono questi strumenti e avere uno Stradivari in mano vuol dire, e suonarlo, significa avere in mano un pezzo di storia della musica, avere un oggetto che ha una grande storia, che è stato suonato in passato da grandi violinisti, che ha uno strumento che ha viaggiato nel mondo e anche l'emozione di poterlo suonare ancora a Cremona, che è la città dove lo strumento è nato.
Cremona is really the heart of violin making, or the birthplace of all these instruments. Population 70,000, but still about 100 violin workshops there, so it's still a very vital part of the culture in Cremona. So it's not just the history, it's the daily life, so you see violins and violin shops all over the city.
Sono stato coinvolto in questo progetto perché io già lavoravo in questo museo e perché abitualmente suono questi strumenti. Questi strumenti io li suono per dei pubblici concerti, delle audizioni pubbliche che si tengono all'interno di questo museo, di questo auditorium dove realizzeremo questo progetto.
It was clear from the beginning that we wanted to record the instruments in this hall because that hall was actually built for these instruments by Yasuhisa Toyota, one of the most famous concert hall designers in the world. And it's a rather small concert hall, only 460 seats about. So it's really designed for chamber music, quartet, solo concerts, and it's fabulous how these instruments sound in exactly that hall. So it was absolutely clear, if we do it in that hall. Unfortunately, of course, it's in the center of the city, and there are 3 streets around, 2 of them with cobblestone, so the noise from the outside was quite a concern. And the mayor held a press conference and actually announced that this recording is going to happen, and he asked the people of Cremona to be quiet at that time. It was absolutely clear to us that it would be very difficult to recreate the sampling session at some point. So for us it was really important to capture basically every aspect of the performance there. So we did set up 32 microphones actually, and it took 3 days until we were happy with the sound. We felt, okay, now we get everything that we would need later on in the post-processing. And it was also clear that we don't want to stretch any samples, so each note of the violin should be sampled and recorded. So everything is chromatically sampled. It's the accurate representation of the instrument which sometimes is quite uneven, but that's the character of the instrument, of course. These were what they felt were the most prestigious instruments of the exhibition, and the ones where the directors of the museum felt they should be ones to be kind of preserved. Of course, they are in very good shape because they have been taken care of. So there are 4 people full-time just maintaining these instruments. There always had to be an armed guard. So in the auditorium there were the musician and the guard, and that was it.
If I think about that, I get almost scared. I get nervous, and you imagine that many things which never happened could happen, like it falls from you, you know. But if you let yourself go with thinking, you will not make it. Okay, so I'm faking. I'm playing a toy, you know, not a real Guarneri del Gesù or Stradivari violin.
We had quite long recording days, so we did this in shifts. 1 instrument in the morning, then for 4 hours another instrument in the afternoon, and again 4 hours in the evening, so a total of 12 hours. One reason for that was especially the cello was a quite fragile instrument, and the Stradivari cello is also a kind of natural treasure to Italy, and it should not be played for longer than 4 hours per day.
È uno strumento che è leggermente più grande della misura normale, quindi richiede qualche minuto di adattamento alla mano. Lo Stradivari è uno strumento magnifico che io stesso non mi aspettavo fosse così comunicativo col violoncellista.
Of course, it is quite demanding for the musician, both physically and mentally, because the musicians had to play these chromatic lines normally and be as consistent as possible, and of course pay attention to the intonation, the expression, the volume, the dynamic. So it's quite a task actually. What I found quite amazing is how different they all sound, because we had the exact same setup there. The microphones of course did not move at all. The only thing that changed was the musician and the instrument, and it's amazing what a personality these instruments have. So they are very, very different actually, although they are violins. It was quite an amazing experience because everybody was so devoted to this project. At some point I felt it's kind of like a Stockholm syndrome. They really were so into this, just as us, and sometimes we heard a problem, sometimes they heard a problem, but it was never the case that it was just ignored. So if something was not perfect, somebody would always mention this. And everybody involved was very aware of the demand of this project. There was also the question whether we can really do these instruments justice with our sampling technology. Very early on in the preparation to the project, we discussed here internally that we would need some new technology actually to make this really work. And one thing is how to control the dynamic on a solo instrument. And with the strings ensemble or with the brass ensemble, you always have several players. And it's actually not so hard to blend through the different dynamics because there are always several instruments involved. But with a solo instrument, when you have a mezzo forte sample and a forte sample, and you have a crossfade at some point, and at that point you will hear 2 instruments. There's no way around it, basically. And the ear is quite sensitive to that, but we really wanted to achieve a seamless dynamic control. So what we actually had to develop for this project was a new way of phase alignment that would allow us to blend through these different dynamics without that kind of phasing. Not only with just one microphone signal, because we have 3 microphone signals, the close, the mid and the far signal. They are all in stereo. They all include the ambience of the auditorium. So in terms of technology, it was quite a challenge actually to develop that kind of thing. So, but it works very good, I think.
Vedo in questo progetto una grande responsabilità, perché il lavoro che noi stiamo facendo qui è un lavoro che è destinato al futuro. È un lavoro che avrà un carattere definitivo perché riusciremo a riprodurre il timbro, il suono, la voce di questi strumenti, e quello che noi facciamo rimarrà per sempre, e quindi c'è questa emozione, questa responsabilità di sapere che in tutto il mondo potranno avere a disposizione il suono di questi strumenti che sono fantastici, ma che però noi avremo suonato, e quindi la cosa mi emoziona.